Good evening, folks. It's kind of late. As you can see, the sun is set and it's starting to cool off nicely out in the desert. I did not give you a show this morning. I didn't record anything. I did on Awakening Israel. I went after the beginning of Samson and Judges, is what I basically called the preview of it. And it's about a couple of chapters in the book of Judges. That's what we're going through over there. What I thought of last night and eluded me this morning a little bit while I was doing the other show is that I forgot that what I wanted to get across to you was the need for flexibility in thinking. Why? Because we're going to have to adjust. We no longer have a republic. We have allowed it to be taken from us. If you can keep it, Ben Franklin said, it's a republic if you can keep it. Sadly, Ben Franklin laid the seed of its destruction himself. There were other seeds that were set out by the founding fathers as well. But in Ben Franklin's case, he was honeypotted. Or maybe it was a bit worse than that. His reputation must have caught up with him, and they took him to the Hellfire Club. And they got him drunk and had him entertained by the girls. That's the way the story goes. I don't have many details on it. But apparently he signed a treaty with a man representing the King of England, who also had an office with the Pope. And the way that treaty was signed caused a corporation to be created under the Pope. And so they incorporated the United States of America. Now, according to one judge at Big Lake in Alaska, and she's got a bit of a reputation, I don't know what to make of her. She claims that the corporation lay fallow. It wasn't utilized until Abraham Lincoln was sworn in as the 16th president. Apparently, he was the president of the corporation rather than the organic government. And he screwed things up. He was not a very good president. He destroyed the republic. Shortly after he was president, the 1871 Organic Act created a jurisdiction known as Washington, D.C., the purpose of which was to administer to that square miles in Washington, D.C., and that's those square miles alone. And clearly they've exceeded their jurisdiction. Slowly but surely they've creeped. Now, I got some good news for you and some not so good news. The good news is that this corporation has a lot of illegal assets illegally. It's holding assets that it's not entitled to. And the nice thing about it is that when we bankrupt this central corporation and finally take it apart, those of us who have vested interests, have contracts, be they fraud or not, we can recover some of the damages. For instance, you might not be able to collect a Social Security check, but you sure as hell can collect title on some of the land. Maybe in Yellowstone National Park, if you like that, or part of Alaska. The federal government's got way too much land in Alaska, and they screwed us up pretty badly up there. Federal government also has a lot of buildings, a lot of patents, a lot of stuff. They actually have a lot of kind of hyper-governmental agencies that make profits. One of those being the CDC makes money off vaccines. Talk about a conflict of interest. So what I'm getting at is they have accounts, they have money, they have patents, they have resources. And were we to bankrupt them, there would be enough to make us whole. So try not to panic too much. And try not to take it on the chin way too much. And realize that these bank failures are purposeful. And these first 3 bank failures are going to wipe out the FDIC insurance fund pretty much entirely. And so from here on out, they've been way too generous bailing out Silicon Valley, since Silicon Valley works for the government or owns it or something. They've got a weird ancestral relationship that shouldn't exist, and they should have been allowed to fail. That's one of the things I would do as president, is I would set things up and tell you, yes, the banks are allowed to fail. If they're not going to run themselves right, then they're going to lose. And that's all there is to it. I know you're going to say that's not very fair. Well, you have to remember a couple of things. One is that there is no money. They've stolen it all. They've stolen the entire country. Who? Well, the people who own that central bank. The people in Europe who own the stock in it. They own this country. They stole it all. So you need to understand a series of frauds has been played on us. It's really horrible. It's going to take quite a magnificent brain to sort it out, but the guy's going to have to be truthful. And that was my biggest disappointment in Trump. He wasn't truthful. As a man of business and educated at Wharton School of Business, he should know that this is monopoly money. He should know that we've been robbed. He should know the nature of the frauds. And if he doesn't, well, then he's a failure. Fire him. Yeah, I'm serious about that. I was not impressed with him during his presidency. I expected more. I expected the release of the Kennedy files so we could finally get to the bottom of that. But you couldn't do that because you exposed the entire FBI, CIA, police state, and you'd have to take it down. I don't have a problem with taking them down. I'm not sure how we would take it apart, and I'm afraid that there would be a lot of exploitation in doing that. I do trust the jarheads in the military, those people with real square heads that don't round corners very well. They take everything square. They take everything concretely. And I would take these FBI agents, all of these officers associated with them, and everyone associated with the CIA into custody. And I would tell the military branches, which I know are screwed up, I'd have to get rid of some of those generals right away, some of those admirals, some of those liars and thieves at the top, those political animals, those political jackasses. And I'd have to be trying people for treason, and I'd be demanding the full price. No, we don't want to allow them to muddy the waters any further. We want to be rid of them once and for all, especially the people that took us down from inside. There were several groups of people, and your Hollywood or Trannywood was instrumental in that, along with your media, your big media. Those people need to pay the price as well. Yeah, I know I'm talking tall orders. I know I'm talking blood in the streets. I know I'm talking a lot of blood. Do you want your nation back? Do you want your freedom back? What about all of the damage that we have allowed these politicians to do by misusing American might? What about all this bullshit that the Bushes pulled? How many million people did they kill? How many million people did Henry Kissinger kill? How many people did Barack Obama kill? I don't think Trump killed very many, by the way. Biden? Biden is setting this up so he can kill a lot of us inside the country right now. They're bringing up as many of these warrior age, in shape men as fast as they can, and they're going to set them loose. From what I can see, I'm sorry, but that looks like it to me. When we started, guns were everywhere. Short swords were everywhere. Muskets, rifles, pistols, cannon. We owned it all. And when you remember the militia didn't issue you anything. You brought your own armaments to the game. Yes, you had a vested interest. You owned those. You took care of those. And by law, you were required to possess them. We had some problems in the state of Pennsylvania because the Amish didn't want it, or whatever it was, didn't want to pull their fair share there. We had problems with some of our laws early on because they didn't want to enforce God's law. You know, adultery was punishable. It was a severe offense. The punishment was severe. They decided they weren't going to make it a death sentence anymore. They were going to put you in the stocks for 10 years. And that was the first deviation from the laws in the Bible in this nation. I believe that. It was presented by a fellow, by one of the Wiki boys, in one of his better presentations. But don't take my word for it. Don't take his word for it. Do your own research. I paid dearly for my education. Oh, I did get a fellow who wanted a Bible signed by me. And the publisher called me up and says, this is what he wants. And I'm like, okay, fine. But, you know, I didn't write it. I wasn't on the committees. And the publisher laughed. We laughed together. And I said, well, fine, I don't know how to endorse it. And immediately it came to my mind. Yahweh bless. What more can be said? What more need be said? I haven't found my blue ink pen, and I don't have good quality clear tape, packing tape to repack this thing. So it's going to be a little bit late. I got it yesterday, and I didn't get to getting the tape today. I ended up taking a nap quite a bit this afternoon. I exercised very hard today, and I just ended up sleeping quite a bit. And that's the way it is after I exercise hard like that. Lorraine, come on. Come on. The door's closed. Quiet. Good girl. We moved. She's not settled in yet. And so she's going to bark at everything and let me know what's going on. And I can't tell if I'm the, if the purpose of my life is to diminish her anxiety or if it's hers to diminish mine. Emotional support is pretty mutual here. Not much gets past her, and that's all right. That's her job. A lot gets past me. The inmates in the penitentiaries. When I walked into the store, the officer in charge of the store said, oh, Dr. Kent. The inmates can't stand Dr. Kent. They hate Dr. Kent. Of course, I listened intently. And I leaned in and says, oh, yeah, tell me about it. Well, and she told me about it. The inmates said they couldn't get away with anything. And that I was the most dangerous man in Central Unit. Central Unit. Level 5, maximum security. Inside the walls, that's what his nickname was, the old walls, from the old Yuma territorial prison that was moved from Yuma to Florence, Arizona. And I had the reputation of being the most dangerous man in Central Unit. And that nothing got past me. And I had to laugh because I knew a lot got past me. I'm sure a lot got past me anyway. The inmates did their best to run game and to take advantage of me like everybody else. And yet the inmates also knew that if they had a problem, they knew they could turn to me and I would take care of it. I wouldn't just ignore them and have them suffering. I mean, we had some crazy guys on the runs that would burn their mattresses up, and that's really acrid stuff. It's a lot like that black smoke that come off the train in Palestine, Ohio. It's toxic, and it would just sicken all the men on the run. And they knew if there was a guy that wasn't right, if he was suffering or if he was dangerous, they could let me know and I'd take care of my job. And even inmates, when they knew they were dangerous to the officers, would come to me and say, I had one guy ask me to put him on a watch. Young fellow, and I'm like, what? Nobody asked to be put on a watch. And he explained it to me. And he was so straight up with his rationalization that if he was trying to put one over on me, he got me. And the captain got in my face. I nicknamed him Captain Teddy Bear. He's kind of a big guy, kind of gruff. I think he works as a cook today somewhere. He actually was a nice fellow, really rough exterior. And he was kind of rough, but he was running the show as for the safety of his men. And of course, when he got in my face demanding to know, you realize I had to send an officer to watch him? And I took a step forward into his face, which is kind of unbelievable. I'm not that big or impressive. And I said to him, Captain, he has been down for 2 years, and he's on the wrong medicine, and he knows it. And he also knows that he has to have clinical failures with these other cheap-ass medicines that aren't the right ones. And he has to go through those before we'll give him the good stuff because it's so expensive. And in 2 years, he's assaulted 14 officers already, and he's afraid he's going to assault one of your officers. And prior to that, in 14 years, he only had 2 assaults. And I told the captain, I'm familiar with the medicine. I've had problems over the years with this medicine because when the guys aren't on this medicine, their paranoia gets to them and they do get violent. It was one of those medicines that has a bad result when people stop taking it. The discontinuation effects must be excruciating because they reach out and smack the heck out of somebody. So I told him, I put him there to protect your officers. The inmate warned me, and he's right. And I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't speed up, the trials, the clinical trials of other medicines. And if I complained, the Wicked Witch downtown didn't give a damn. I mean, I had such dumb women supervising me. When I actually had a program, I put together a pilot program. I wanted to run it because we had the wrong medicines out in the yard. We were wasting millions of dollars of medicine a year just in that one facility in Florence. And so I put my proposal together, took it to my boss, and rather than put me to work on it, she took it as if it was her proposal and took it up to her boss. And then rather than work with me on it, they implemented this proposal across all of the other core places in DOC. So instead of wasting $2 million a year on medications, it went up to $6 million a year. I mean, I walked in one time, and there were 2 of these long tables. These fold-out tables, not quite fold-out, but they've got legs on them and they're long, and you can sit 3 adult men easily, maybe even 4 on one side of the table. So they had 2 of those huge tables, and the medicines were in packets. And there were so many packets piled up, they were overflowing onto the floor. And what had happened is that was from North Yard alone, North Unit. I think there was only 2,000 men in that. Don't hold me to that, it's been a while. And those were the medicines they picked up that these inmates had stored in their tents. And so the dumbasses that I was working with had decided, since they were libtards, that they knew better than the rest of us. And they figured out, and they told me this, they figured that if they gave a man a diagnosis so he would get a disability check when he got out, that it would be cheaper for us to pay the disability check of $500, $550 a month than it would be to incarcerate the inmate, and thereby they would help society. And I told them, you can't do that. You can't give them the wrong diagnosis and discharge them on medicines that make life harder for them, that make thinking more difficult for them. You make a more dangerous product. And so there I was, trying to streamline it, trying to put proper structure to it, trying to get a proper workup with proper diagnosis, with a proper treatment recommended. And they went against me because they knew better, because they were liberals and they knew. We find these men got a mental illness, they get a disability check, then they don't have to reoffend. And the real problem I saw was that these men were reoffending, and their attorneys were pretty sharp. And the attorneys would tell them, we have a mitigating factor. What was the mitigating factor? Well, the Department of Corrections gave them those professionals in mental health gave them the wrong diagnosis. It wasn't the right diagnosis, and a result of that was they were given medications which made it more difficult for them to think clearly and function clearly and behave themselves. That was a mitigating factor. So we were producing a more dangerous product. I got a call. I got a call from my buddy in pharmacy. John, you got to come in. You got to see this for yourself. I said, what's going on? He says, well, you remember that proposal you had me work up? Because I worked with him. He gave me all the stats, so I had the numbers for what medicines were prescribed and all that stuff. I mean, it was really a shit show of all shit shows. It was bad. And I get in there and he shows me. He says, look at what they've done. He says, they took your program and they didn't let you go with your program. I says, look, it was just supposed to be on 1 yard, 1 unit, to prove its efficacy, its effectiveness, to prove that it was going to be cost effective and it was going to produce a less dangerous product. We were going to release a less dangerous inmate into the public. And of course, part of it was the inmates would complain about needing sleep medicines, and the stupid ass psychiatric nurse there in particular, the one that they called the 2-year wonder, because she got a 2-year degree in Canada and somehow it transferred and translated into a full 4-year degree down in Arizona with the nursing board. And she was running the show. She was running the psychiatrist and running all the mental health professionals from her little position. And she was a bitch. She didn't like people very much. She was real big on padding the clock, overbilling for her hours, overbilling for the contract psychiatrist, helping all those guys, putting in the wrong time so that we would pay more money out. A lot of fraud, a lot of stuff going on there. That's not all of it either, and I walked into my boss's office and I told her I knew what she had done. And I told her that, it wouldn't be that hard to fix the problem. And she wanted to know what to do. And I told her, look, you've treated me horribly. You're on your own. You've stolen my ideas. You've given me no credit. And not only that, you've done this in a way you've caused damage. You've caused a lot of harm. Anyway, a lot of inmates were reoffending or were getting violated while on parole. They were coming back down and they were coming in, and I'd see them come in, and sometimes they'd tell me, yeah, I stopped taking my medicine and I knew I really shouldn't do that, and my thinking got off, and one thing led to the other, and the guy would look at me and says, man, am I glad to see you. And he'd say, I never thought I'd be saying that. And I thought, oh my God, this is just too uncanny. When you have liberals thinking that it's okay to be flexible and it's okay to give a man a chuck just to try to keep him from offending, you really screw things up. You screw it up for the rest of us. You produce a more dangerous product. People can get killed out there because of what you've done, what you've released, how you've screwed a man up, given him the wrong diagnosis, and he's out there on medicines that addle his brain. He can't think right. He can't think about what's in his best interest. He's got no impulse control. Really dumb. I did my best to get that project approved of properly, get it on the ground, and all I wanted was a pilot program on 1 yard just to prove its efficacy. I can't say it. Efficacy. I'm afraid I'm going to cuss when I try to pronounce it anymore. But I was just astounded. You have people that steal, liberals who steal ideas, steal credibility. Oh, and I got the loan repayment program for the entire Department of Corrections, and they did a lot of fraud and malfeasance on that. I'm going to be getting some letters off. This Speaker of the House impresses me, And I know of a crime in which the Congress was defrauded. I know of malfeasance, willing, purposeful malfeasance and fraud committed against the United States Congress. But the bureaucracy doesn't care because it's all deep state. It's all Democrats. As long as you're a member of the party, they don't give a shit. You can do whatever you want. They find out you're a Republican leaning, conservative leaning, or you don't agree with the party, their party, they go after you. Yeah, I was given 3 months leave at home with pay. They sent me home because, as the Inspector General for the Department of Corrections said, he would either have to send everybody else home or send me home. And so it was much cheaper for him to have me at home. The problem was the rest of them were committing the crimes and they knew it. But Department of Corrections is real weird. They let their staff get away with crimes. They let them get paid off. And they'd rather have that than be embarrassed. I mean, we had one fellow who was a psychologist who worked as a deputy warden. He would sign anything. And the major took advantage of that. And the major put in to the pile of papers something that signed off paying his note, discharging his mortgage on his house. It was on the order of 80 grand, was getting paid off by the Arizona Department of Corrections because this guy who wouldn't read anything he signed it. And when the administration department found out about it, when the state of Arizona found out about it, you would have thought they would have put the major in prison. I mean, for embezzling funds. You would have thought that they would have, convicted him of a felony. Oh, no. They sent him home, and they let him keep the money. And as far as the DW, who was a psychologist, they decided to punish all psychologists. At that point, psychologists were removed from the core retirement system. They claimed we weren't having inmate contact. My God, we had inmate contact, and we were right in there working with security. We helped security until that time. Then they decided to put the mental health people, psych, underneath medical rather than underneath security. I think we belonged under security. And they decided that we no longer could become deputy wardens. Okay, I understand that. But they took away the retirement benefit that we should have had. And at the time I arrived, they were trying to enroll me in core. They actually enrolled me in core, then took me out of it and put me in ASRS. I would rather have stayed in core, a little bit higher contribution on my part, but the reward was better, and the stress and strain was recognized, as an officer, and the benefit would have been a little bit better. But they can't do things on the right in the Department of Corrections. The fraud and malfeasance that goes on in the Department of Corrections is so massive, and it goes on to this day. It's institutionalized, and it's all the way up to the governor's office. I can assure you that the previous governor, the Republican, dipped his hand deep in the cookie jar, in that gravy train. And I can assure you this current governor, who works for the cartel? What's that, the Sinaloan cartel? She's been working with them since 1997, and she's in the governor's office today. I can assure you that she's going to be dipping her hand in the cookie jar as well. You see, it used to be that the head of the Arizona Department of Corrections used to get only about $1 million a year on the sly from their scheme. I'm sure it's much more than that today due to inflation. You can bet the last governor collected that money as well. He came from an organized crime family anyway. His name was Roscoe. Well, I just wanted to get you a bit up to date with some things and give you something today, even though it's late in the day. And I'm going to look over here at my channel. This should be 144. I think it should be. I know we've been covering a lot of stuff that's in the Bible and crossing over. I just try to give you a flow of consciousness. Try to associate things up so that you can understand a little bit more of what goes on. Your Department of Corrections in Arizona should not be allowed to incarcerate and keep anybody. They aren't run properly, not at all. They don't have security. They still play a big fraud game on the locks. That's how they make those millions of dollars every year that they shuffle around throughout the state. There's probably more money off the books than there is on the books in the Arizona Department of Corrections. And because they're so directly under the governor, they're protected, and the legislators can never get to it and discover the frauds at all. I mean, if they listen to me, they might be able to go after it. And I can tell you that a large part of what I learned was from another officer, a fellow who was in security, who handled the locks in the security system. I think there were probably 2 attempts on his life by the administration. So we don't take this stuff that lighthearted. It's pretty serious stuff. Talk about knowing people in low places. I think that the state of Arizona, the track record for the criminal justice system is absolutely appalling. It's horrible. I would have to say across the country, 10% of our inmates are falsely accused, incarcerated on fraudulent charges, except in Arizona. It's probably closer to 20%. It's probably double the national average. And then when you go to the Deep South, yes, the prisons have a very bad reputation, but there happens to be some sort of a balance because the inmates have a little bit more say in those penitentiaries. So there is a certain level of Southern justice in those. However, when you're outside of the South, nothing compares to the state of Arizona and the correction system there, with their supermaxes, these above-ground dungeons, the funk, the stink, the smell, the horrible conditions. And of course, when you get these libtards in the governor's office, they don't want to execute people. They want them to live for a long time. Seems like they make money off those guys somehow. And the current governor is going to delay the executions. She probably has the power to do it. I think she's got the authority. I think she can stop these executions. Should she do it? Well, the problem is justice delayed is justice denied. And at this point, the guy who's up for the hot seat, that was more than 20 years ago. He's been able to live 20 years longer than his victims. What kind of justice is that? Well, I have some more to talk about on this. I'm going to take care of myself and sign off right now. It's getting a little late at night for me. Yeah, I nap most of the afternoon, which is going to throw me off a bit. I don't like doing it that way. I had too much sugar yesterday, and that knocked me on my butt as well. And today I exercised pretty hard. And it feels good. And my chemistry looks good. The numbers and everything look good at the moment. We'll see shortly. You take care out there. It is time to duck and cover. You have the liberals bailing the banks out beyond the dictates of the law. So they are, again, rewarding bad behavior, which means they're going to get more bad behavior. But the problem is what they're doing right now is going to lead to a total collapse of the dollar, which is what they want, because then they can bring in a new system and it will be purely digital where everything is tracked. You won't be able to do anything without them knowing about it, tracking you. It is a horrible, horrible, overreaching government. It's not a republic at all. It's certainly not a democracy. You still got this fiasco of January 6th going on where these people are in jail still. And you've got men sentenced to long prison sentences who weren't given any justice. They weren't given the full evidence, access to it. That's not right. And you have the Attorney General and the FBI glad to do that to these men. It's time to take those apart. It's time to let the states take care of the crimes again. All policies, all policing was reserved for the states. I think we're going to have to go back to that. Maybe we should enlarge the scope of sheriffs and allow one sheriff to charge another sheriff across the country so that sheriffs are kept in balance. We need our militias. You need to become a member of a militia. Remember, you're going to have a commander officer. You're going to have a superior officer. You're going to have somebody you're accountable to. And not only will you be accountable to that person, but that person is going to have to be able to think very clearly and give you proper orders as well. Proper guidance, proper orders. You're going to need it. The purpose of the militia is to quell insurrections, stop the rioting, and defend the borders. That's right. Stop the invaders. And right now, Biden is bringing in as many people as he can. These people are given a freer ride than our own people are. Our own people are not given much money on the dole, but these invaders are rewarded very high. I have a friend who told me that he met a woman. She's on her third car. She's from South America somewhere. They gave her a driver's license. She didn't even have to test for it. And she's wrecked two cars. They gave her the first one, they gave her the second one, and now they've given her the third one. They give her brand new cars. And then you look at the doggone rate for hotel rooms, and they're all booked up, and the fees are way up there, and they charge more money on the weekends. And these poor people that don't have any other place to live are forced to go out, sometimes for the night, sometimes for the weekend, because the rates are too high. It's not right when you have a market that is thrown off by your federal government to that extent. All right. America could be great again, but we have to become good first. Make America good again. May Yahweh bless. This is number 144.